Good morning, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Clark McCall. I'm a member of the Contemporary Issues Committee, and Dr. Missy Stults is here to talk with us. For the last 2 years, Missy's been the manager of the Office of Sustainability and Innovation in the city of Ann Arbor. That's the office that's leading the work to meet Ann Arbor's commitment to being carbon neutral by 2030. This is a goal that puts Ann Arbor at the forefront of transitioning to a sustainable energy system. Dr. Stults has a Ph.D. in urban resilience from the University of Michigan, a master's in climate and society from Columbia University, and undergrad degrees in marine biology and environmental science from the University of New England. Thanks for being with us here, Dr. Stults.
My pleasure, and thank you all for inviting me into your homes for our conversation today. I really hope we can have a conversation, and special thanks to you, Clark. I know we had attempted to do this last year, and then this pesky thing called the pandemic came about.
Yeah, something happened.
This little thing that has altered a lot of things in our lives for sure, and happy to kind of talk about that too, if that's relevant. Well, just before I start, to kind of like ground me, how many of you have heard about A20? Oh, all right, that's great. Okay, how many of you feel like you're pretty knowledgeable about A20? So don't tell me much about it. Tell me what you're doing. Anybody? Clark, I imagine is a yes on that. But,
yeah.
Okay.
It's always more. It's amazing.
Okay, I'm going to give a little bit of a background on what this thing is, A20, and how it came about, and then I'm going to try to pivot pretty quickly into what's happening locally, and I'll interrupt at any point. And it's not interrupting, actually. I would like this to be a conversation. I'm going to try to focus on activities and things that we can do in order to engage in the kind of broader movement that is A20. But again, this should be a conversation. So if at any point you're like, oh, I'm bored, tell me and I will pivot fast to whatever you want to talk about. On that, does anyone have anything they want to make sure they want to talk about? And if you do, feel free to put it in the chat, and I'll keep monitoring that so I can pivot. Okay, I'm going to share some screens, and if like me you're just done with Zoom, I totally understand. Feel free to do whatever you need to do. Be on camera, be off camera, make some tea, do some yoga. I get it. We're Zoom fatigued. I get it. Okay, so welcome to A20. A20 is certainly our plan for how we're going to decarbonize, but it's much, much more than that. It's the entire movement about how we're going to achieve a just transition to community-wide carbon neutrality. This is the A20 logo. You're going to see it around town. You hopefully are starting to see it in some places. You're going to see it a lot more. So I just want to start very quickly by saying this didn't just happen. I'm assuming many of you are familiar with the long, rich history of environmentalism and environmental action that exists in our community. It goes back well before 81, but we often start with 81 because there was this formal thing that happened, which was the city became the first city in America to create an energy plan, really laser focusing on energy efficiency and renewable energy. And that formed the Energy Commission. And then the leadership continued to be formalized and crystallized in different ways. There was, we were one of the founders for a global movement called ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. I was lucky enough to be the climate director for ICLEI USA before I came to Ann Arbor, and I got to work with the staff in Ann Arbor while I was there. So this was a global movement and still continues to be a global movement. In fact, just a few weeks ago, Mayor Taylor was appointed to the Global Executive Committee for ICLEI. He's one of only 2 U.S. mayors who were appointed, largely because of the work our community is doing around decarbonization. You can follow this over the last 40 years to see kind of the history and the evolution of our environmental work. And in 2019, the most recent iteration crystallized in the passing of a climate emergency declaration, basically saying climate change necessitates an emergency response. Like any other crisis that we would have, which means we can't keep doing what we've always been doing. We have to think about this quite differently. And with that then came the charge to create a plan for how we were going to decarbonize our local economy and way of life, hence A20. So in November of 2019, Council said, okay, we have a climate emergency. Staff work with the community and create a plan. Create a plan for how we're going to achieve the goal of carbon neutrality by 2030. Go forward. And so the way we did that, we often talk about it in a funnel. We had these 3 phases, which are the balls inside the funnel. The first was ideation. Anything anyone had as an idea, we took. That was from peer-reviewed literature, from contemporary literature like Drawdown. We formed technical advisory committees. We had 83 individuals on 4 technical advisory committees. So they were experts in circular economy or waste reduction, energy, transportation and mobility, or resilience. And so they were telling us, technically, this is what you have to do to create a local decarbonization strategy. Of course, we have staff expertise. We looked to peer cities around the world, and we obviously took extensive public input, because just because something is technically possible does not mean that it's socially acceptable, right? So we needed those things to talk to each other. The first phase was ideation. Second phase was we prioritized what came out, and I can talk about how we did that. And then the third phase really focused on how do we actually do this, right? So this is what we have to do. How are we going to get an ordinance through? How are we going to engage with the public in these ways? And so to get all of that information from those phases, we ran 3 public surveys. Our last 2 grossed over 1,000 respondents. We estimate that we hit over 1 in every 10 Ann Arborites participated in some activity, and it's likely much higher, but we don't have, we moved really fast. And I would say that one of the flaws was we didn't capture as much demographic data at the beginning as we wanted to. We sort of rallied at the end. With 82, sorry, was that a question?
When you want to see the whole thing, you have to turn it sideways.
Oh, okay. We had 82 working days, not counting weekends and the holidays. But that said, we worked all weekends to get the plan done. So we ran 68 public events. We actually had 80 public events scheduled, but COVID came, and so we had to cancel our last 12. We ran 2 large town halls. We had those 80 technical advisors, and we had at the moment 66 partner organizations. I'm delighted to announce that as of Thursday, when I last counted, we have 90 partner organizations in our community that are working with us, and it's growing continually. And I can tell you more about who those are. So all of these things kind of mesh together in a really intensive process, which I probably wouldn't change if given the opportunity, because the urgency necessitates a smart plan, but a living plan that's going to change and action. And so in 82 days, we got to the plan. And the values that guided that process, we knew we had to kind of lay the foundation as we went into this process and say, what are the core values or tenets that we hold that's going to like bind this plan together? And we picked equity, sustainability, and transformation. And just for time, I won't unpack most of these. I think the first 2, I hope, make sense. The last, fundamentally, if we just can't keep doing what we've done historically, whether that's perpetuating social and economic inequality, racial inequality, the absolute and total devastation of our ecosystems and our environment, of course, the amount of greenhouse gases. We just can't keep doing that and get out of the crisis that we're in. We have to transform our system. And so this was the one that was kind of the most exciting and gave the most permission for people to really think differently about how we move forward. So that led to the vision. And the vision created by our community is that together, we are creating and implementing a just transition to community-wide carbon neutrality by 2030. I won't belabor this, but I'm happy to talk about it. It was, all of our work is informed by data. Right? It depends on how people want to talk about this, but we can dive into this. This is a greenhouse gas emissions inventory, one snapshot of the results. We've been doing greenhouse gas emissions inventories to understand both government operations and our entire community's contribution to climate change since 2000. So we have year-over-year data. We're just finishing 2020. We should have it by midsummer. It'll be an anomaly because of COVID. The numbers, we're going to have to play and really understand what we can glean from 2019. 2020, because of how the pandemic kind of shook the system. But when we do an inventory, we look at it by sector. You're seeing that here. What's in the university? What's in residential? What's commercial? What's from our commuting patterns? And we look at it by source. So how much is from electricity versus natural gas versus propane versus gasoline and diesel? And so this informs the action, right? Because if we're going to get to 0 greenhouse gas emissions, or as close as possible, we have to understand what sources make that up so we can close those gaps. And happy to talk about this. The University of Michigan is about 1/3 of our greenhouse gas emissions. That often comes up. So this got us to the plan, and the plan is living. It will change. It is wrong. The instant it was written, it was wrong. Technology will change, social appetite, political will, all of those things move and shift. And so we really focused on creating a plan that could be flexible, iterative, living, etc. So the things that are the most kind of grounded, that always hesitant to have absolutes, very likely will not change, are the colored strips. So the grouping of those together. Those are the strategies. There are 7 strategies that underpin A20, and these are things that have to be done no matter what if you're going to achieve carbon neutrality. I'm going to focus on those really quick. Strategy 1, we've got to power our electrical grid with renewable energy. There really is no wiggle room there. The good news on this strategy is that the pathway is actually pretty technologically possible. You can have renewables with battery storage, you can do demand management features, you can do microgridding. This excites me because there's all kinds of opportunity here. We're spending a lot of time in the office right now on strategy 1 because I see the path to success is just inches away in this strategy. Strategy 2, we need to electrify. We have to transition off of natural gas, diesel, propane, coal, et cetera, over to electric, especially as that electric is becoming cleaner and 100% renewable. The third is energy efficiency, right? We waste a whole lot of our money by heating and cooling the outdoors because it leaks. About 40% of the energy that we consume in our homes goes right out leaky windows, leaky doors, through cracks in the floorboards, et cetera. And so what's different in strategy 3 is historically in our movement, we've focused on energy efficiency. You might often hear efficiency first. Absolutely. What's different today though is I can't phase it. I don't have time. With 9 years left, I can't go efficiency through the entire community and then come back and do electrification with solar. We're working on a program that pairs them together. So we can come in and do deep efficiency, improve the quality and the comfort of your home. At the same time, we're helping you make the transition to things like an electric range, a cookbook, which for some people, the industry did a really, really good job of teaching us that natural gas is high end. But that's what we need to have to cook. And a lot of us are really, really comfortable with that. The thing is, research has just shown that the vast majority of us do not have properly ventilated kitchens. And because of that, burning natural gas, it's combusting on site, right? As soon as you turn on that stove, indoor air quality in many of our homes is up to 100 times worse than what is legally allowable for outdoor air quality. That's a big deal. So we have a public health crisis associated with how we cook. And for many of us, we turn on that range multiple times a day. So we're laser focused on an initiative to help people transition their ranges to electric, demonstrating it still works. It's actually super cool with induction. We just switched out to an induction range 2 weeks ago in my house. And it's really, really exciting to see how fast that system is when water boils in less than a minute. So all of the energy that you're using is really, really efficient. But we're helping kind of demystify that electric ranges can work. Sorry, I belabored that one. FYI, we're doing a range replacement campaign. If you would like to join us, please let me know. Strategy 4 for us was the one that always gave me the most heartburn because it's a behavior change strategy. And that is we have to reduce the miles we travel in our vehicles by at least 50%. And those that we do travel that remain need to be in electric vehicles, on electric buses, on zero emissions technologies. We need people to be able to walk and bike. We need people to be able to telework. But this one scared me pre-COVID because it was such a big shift in behavior. And COVID has taught us that a lot more things are possible in this space. We actually have more than achieved this week over week in the pandemic. But let's pause. Teleworking isn't equal. It's not equitable. Who has to drive? I don't have to drive, right? As an office worker, I'm capable of being here. But a restaurant worker still has to drive. And in most cases, that restaurant worker is not making as much. Well, I can almost guarantee they're not making as much as I am making, right? So it's not an equal strategy. So we still have a lot of work to do in that. This also has to do with land use. You need to be able to walk and bike. If you're going to walk and bike, the things you need to walk and bike to. If the grocery store is still 7 miles away, most of us aren't going to walk and bike to that grocery store. So we've got to have accoutrements close enough. So this is inherently also a land use strategy. Strategy 5 is fundamentally about a circular economy, switching the way we consume and get rid of materials. So when I'm done with this cup, this glass still has a whole lot of functional use. How do we make sure that stays in the system as opposed to going to a landfill where it has no more use? Right? So how do we kind of change the way we think about materials in our life? The 5th, despite what we do, climate change is already here. It's going to continue happening. We're doing everything we can to manage the extreme impacts. We have to be investing in the resilience of our people, our ecosystems, our communities, our neighborhoods. Our sense of place is really, really important. And the last is a catch-all. These are things like our equity programs that don't belong in any one strategy because they belong in every strategy. Right? So they have to be meeting. This is overwhelming. Welcome to the 44 actions that are in your plan. These will change, but I just wanted to share the team. So A20 is not quite a year old. It was adopted June 1st. June 1st will be a fun date. I'll tell you that in a second. But we're working on 22 right now. We have programs either up and operational, or we have active planning happening. The tranche you see in the middle are the land use strategies. Those got put on hold pretty hard and fast in COVID. Things like our transit system took a really big hit during the pandemic. And so we've had to kind of repivot. We've started talking to them about how we're going to really safely bring people back online in the fall, if it's safe to do so, because I have a pretty big fear that people are going to be scared of taking transit for a little while. I think we're going to be a little fearful of coming back together. Some of us will be in large group settings. And so we're working a lot to understand the HVAC system upgrades, the air exchanges that are happening. How are we promoting that this is really a safe way to move? Because I don't want to see vehicle miles go up because people aren't taking the transit system that we have, or they're not walking and biking when they have an opportunity to do so. You guys doing okay? How are we doing? Are you bored out of your minds yet? You loving it?
Oh, keep going, Missy.
Before I transition to some of the things that we're doing, I just want to share, we've got this plan. We also have a governance framework. I've said a few times, this is a living, iterative plan. What does that mean? Well, the governance framework outlines that. Talks about who has responsibility for various elements of the plan. It talks about how we'll make changes to the plan and when we'll make changes to the plan. So this way we actually know. It's not just a statement, we have a strategy for how the plan gets done. We also have a prioritization framework. Everything that's in that plan had to go through this framework, right? We got hundreds of ideas. We got it down to 44 because we put it through rigor. So if Clark came to me today and was like, Missy, I have the most brilliant idea in the world. I bet it is. And then what I'm going to do is take that idea, put it in this prioritization framework, and it's going to pass muster compared to everything else. It's going to kick something out. It has to be able to demonstrate that it's aligned with our equity principles, that it's got co-benefits that align with things like affordable housing, et cetera, et cetera. It's got to pass muster. And then the last thing is one possible investment scenario. How are we going to do this? Right? And so this walks through different ways that one pathway by which we can invest. This is absolutely unequivocally wrong, right? We wrote this 18 months ago when, for example, there was no stimulus, right? And so now I'm working frantically with my peers to talk about how we build back in a more equitable and sustainable way. I don't want to make the mistakes of the last 100 years. I want to really try to think forward. And so we might actually have opportunities, especially with Pete Buttigieg in the DOT. He's really thinking about transit systems. There's just different opportunities that we didn't have before. So the investment scenario is sort of like what it's going to take economically, and then some ideas about how to finance them, but definitely. And then we have this is one of the governance committees. We actually met on Friday. This is a 6-entity kind of aggregation congregation that we have that focuses on how collectively we're going to achieve carbon neutrality locally. So it's Ann Arbor Public Schools, Washtenaw County, the city, the RIDE, the Michigan League of Conservation Voters, and I don't know if I said AAPS, but if not, AAPS. And so the 6 of us, many of us have carbon neutrality goals. Ann Arbor Public Schools, it looks like, is about to set one or work on a committee to set one. And so how do we collaborate? We don't have time for AAPS to do a solar RFP and then the city to do a solar RFP. Why aren't we writing them together? Why aren't we going to procure things at scale? As we're doing bus electrification, why aren't we doing them together? Right? These are the kinds of things we're starting to explore as a group. So let me just really quickly walk you through a few high-level things like actual actions in the works, and then I'm going to stop. That's why I talk really fast. I love what I do. So I'm sorry if it's hard to understand. I will try to slow down. Okay, so one of the things that will be coming out in the next few weeks is benchmarking. What this is basically disclosure of energy and water usage in our buildings. So it's not a performance. It's not saying you have to, thou shall hit this particular level of energy use. While that is something that would be great to have, this is about informing the market about how people are performing. For most individuals, this is for commercial buildings, this is for rentals, and this will be for single family homes when they're sold. right? So I'll take that one first. When you go to buy a home, you can look at lots of information that may or may not be relevant. You could look at the great school score, which may matter a lot if you've got youth that are going to be in a school system. But if you don't, you just ignore that, right? Not particularly relevant. What we want to do in this case is help an individual understand the energy and water usage of that home. In a market like Ann Arbor's, people buy at the top of the market. If you had the choice between renting a place or buying, either way, and the average energy bill was $500 a month versus $100 a month, that's important information to understand if you can or cannot afford a particular place, right? So we want to disclose to the market. It also, if you think about big commercial enterprises in town, it helps us as a really small staff figure out how to help them perform better. I know if I have a 94 in my market, they're doing something right. And I want to understand what they're doing and I want to celebrate them. I want them to be a champion to talk to others. And I know I need to help a 54 and a 44 improve performance, right? So I have opportunities there. So disclosure is not performance, but it helps us be far more surgical with helping people improve the comfort and the cost that they're spending on energy and water. We have a program called Solarize. It's one of our more notable programs that's getting a lot of attention. This is where it's residential right now, although I want to talk about one we have on houses of worship called Solar Faithful. The Solarize program is where someone on this line, so Rachel really is jazzed about solar. She's found her installer. You are stoked and we are so happy for you. You're like, it's not enough for me to go solar. I want to tell the world about this. So we would work with Rachel and we would organize an event with your friends and your neighbors and your colleagues, and you would tell them about solar. And our Solarize contractor would be there too, and she would help them understand, like, this is what it actually means to go solar. And here's how the permitting process works. And then at the end, if people sign up for solar, you all get discounts. Your installer will have worked with the city to negotiate a discount structure. And the highest level of discount is if 10 or more individuals over a period of time choose to go solar, you get an extra 15% off. You get the 26% federal tax incentive and you get 15% more off. We have never had less than 15% off because people just do this. They trust you, right? Like, they're your friends. You've done your due diligence. They're ready to go. With this program, in just over a year, we helped 1 megawatt of rooftop solar go up. That is a lot of rooftop solar. It's a lot. We have a similar program that we do with Michigan Interfaith Power and Light, and it's on houses of worship. And so in this case, just like cities, houses of worship, they're not tax-paying entities, and so they don't get that 26% federal tax incentive. So in this situation, congregants actually buy the solar on the roof, and the house of worship gets the benefit. They get a little bit of return, more return that most of us get in our retirement plans, especially if you've got more safer investments. And so people are actually making, believe it or not, they're making a little bit of money on this, but they're not doing it in most cases for money. They're doing it because they care deeply about their house of worship and the sustainability ethos that exists. So we're going to have a presentation on this on Tuesday night at the Energy Commission, if anyone wants to come and learn more about that program. But I just wanted to share, given the audience we have today. You may know the city passed about 2 months ago an EV readiness ordinance. This requires that, I think it's that one. Well, I'll take them both together. The EV readiness ordinance requires that all new developments and major renovations in the city have to either be EV ready, EV capable, or EV installed. And this is just basically getting ready for the electric vehicle, that's what EV stands for, sorry, transition that we see on the horizon. We also are working with AAPS and the RIDE on bus electrification. We work on state electric vehicle policy. We're working with Ford, GM, and Chrysler on a EV bulk buy for the community, trying to lower the cost to access this. Of course, we're super supportive of what the federal administration is trying to do with EV discounts directly off the front. They tend, right now, they're tax incentives, so you would get them if you're a tax-paying entity, but we want a direct rebate so more and more people can access this. So we've been working on that. And then, of course, we're trying to transition our fleet at the city. I'm super jazzed that on Thursday, we finally got agreement that we're going to attempt to buy our first electric refuse truck, so our first recycling in the fleet, which is a big deal. I think it's the first in Michigan that'd be coming online. Fingers crossed, very exciting stuff. And then my team is working on charging infrastructure. So there's 4 fast chargers that are going to go into City Hall, and the goal for next year is to put upwards of 100 more chargers throughout the town, some of them in underserved areas, so we can help with electrification. This is super exciting. You were one of the first people I can share this with. Community solar is not allowed in Michigan under our legislative policies. It's up to utilities to determine that they want to offer community solar. What this basically is if you have a roof that's not solar viable, you have beautiful bur oaks or something else that are shading your roof, right? You can't go solar, or you don't own your roof, or you can't afford $15,000 to put solar on your roof. Lots of reasons you can't have solar. But you can afford to spend $5 or $10 a month to buy into a community solar program and then get the benefit of that solar. So you'll get a credit on your bill for whatever it produces, helping you lower your energy bill. Now, that sounds great. Well, that's community solar. So we're not allowed in DT service territory to do community solar. They do not like it. They do not want to pilot it. As so happens, part of my job is getting involved in legal cases. And we are a group that sued DTE in their most recent voluntary green power program. You may know this is My Green Power. Some of you may sign up for it. I find that program, as currently written, to be overpriced, unequitable, and not accessible to a whole bunch of the market. And so we wrote legal testimony saying, as a client, we would like these kinds of things. We will buy DTE if you offer these kinds of programs. And one of them was community solar. And it took us a very long time, months and months, but it looks like we have got to settlement, and we will have the very first community solar program in DTE's territory on the Ann Arbor landfill. You will be able to, within a year or so, be able to actually buy into that and get local solar and all the benefits that come with it, investing in that renewable energy here in our community. So stay tuned for more. Hopefully we're going to ink the settlement. Council, I believe, is going to have a vote on the 19th, whether or not they want to settle. So here's us. And we're working a lot on electrification. I mentioned the range replacement campaign. We're also doing a heat pump workshop. If you're thinking about your HVAC system, air conditioning is on the fritz, or you think you're going to need to update it, please join us. I think that's May 19th, but I might have the date wrong. I will check in a minute. And then there's a whole bunch here. We're working with IBEW, our local electrical union, on a campaign. And you might actually see, I think we're buying a billboard is what I heard on Friday. And so there's going to be the A20 kind of co-branding associated with that, really training all electricians in the community about the need to electrify and right size your panels whenever they're going and doing work, so we lower costs and help more people access electric technology. Building codes are really important. I won't belabor this, just to say in Michigan, we can't have building codes that are more aggressive than the state. I can't require you to do something. I can incent you to do something. So we're working hard. We have team members who've been working to try to bypass building codes. We're on the 2015 code. We haven't adopted 2018, and 2021 is out. So we're trying to get people to bypass 2018 and adopt the 2021 building code, which has a 0 code appendix. If adopted, it would mean that we could require all buildings in Ann Arbor, new buildings, to be 0 greenhouse gas emissions. We want that, right? Like, the first thing you do in a crisis is you turn off the spigot, right? You just stop emissions from coming. And so that's one of the really important tenets that we have. We're planting 10,000 trees. We have our free tree giveaway, our very first one happening. It is, you can sign up right now for trees. They're all conifers. We have a cicada emergence coming this year, this spring. The cicadas will be out. Cicadas really don't like conifers. They're not preferred. So that's why we're focusing on conifers for our first one. These are all free. We help you maintain them, give tips on how to plant and water, etc. for those trees. And I'm happy to point you to our website if you would like to sign up and help us increase tree coverage, canopy coverage throughout the community, especially on private property. If you are so excited about A20, which I know you all must be, you can join us as an A20 ambassador. This is a 9-week training program where you learn far more details about all the elements of A20, and then you join us. You help us by speaking at public events. You get a little bit of grant funding to help your neighborhood do work, etc. This is just a way to kind of be more entrenched in the movement. And if you have an idea, something that you've really wanted to do in the public space, we run a grant program. You can get up to $10,000 to do something related to sustainability. It could be public art. It could be a social service. It could be a renewable energy product. I don't have all the answers. That would be very, very silly to assume that we did. Our community has a lot of really great ideas about what we should be doing. So raise those and you can apply. We have up to $100,000 each year that we grant out. And that's our Sustaining Ann Arbor Together grant program. And with that, there's a whole bunch more, about 14 more activities actively underway, but I'm going to stop there and see how you all are doing. Questions, concerns, heartburn?
Missy, John speaking. First of all, I'd like to take a closer look at several of the slides, and particularly the contributions to greenhouse gases. Will these slides be available to us? Are you willing to share them?
Happy to. You can also go on our website if you're interested in the GHG inventory. We post it, so you can dive into the specific numbers. And then there's also a short video that our energy analysts put together to walk through how the inventory is compiled.
And I also had a question related to that slide. If I was interpreting it correctly, it looks like there's been a net decrease in greenhouse gas emissions in the city. Am I interpreting that correctly?
You're right. Yep, we've had our actual reduction year over year.
And I didn't have time to study as carefully as I might have liked, but it looks like the primary sources of reduction came from the university and commercial buildings.
Yeah, so the primary source, it depends on which year you're talking about. So the two main factors are University of Michigan sold the Pfizer facility, so it went off the books. And so that reduced their emissions pretty notably, and then it switched to the commercial sector, but it sat idle for a while. And then the second is our electric grid. Our electric grid is getting cleaner, especially with the transition from coal to natural gas. So you see a reduction in that.
Okay, thank you.
I'll drop the link to the inventory materials on our website. Please go ahead. I am completely multitasking, trying to find that in the background.
Yeah, if I can just, there are kind of three questions. First of all, we just got a new furnace. It's a gas furnace, high efficiency, and it sounds as if you're trying to transition people away from any gas appliances. I would assume that includes a furnace. And yet in the past, the cost of heating a house with an electric furnace was just out of sight compared to using a natural gas furnace. And I'm kind of curious how that transition can occur when it appears anyway, the costs are still so far out of line with one another when it comes to expense. Secondly, we are real interested in maybe adding solar panels to our roof. And normally, do you go then start with the city to get those referrals, or do you just find one of these companies that tend to do it? I've seen some lawn signs in our area, holding that up. And third, just a point that I want to make that Jane made in the chat area, which is that our church added solar panels to our roof probably about 2 years ago now. So I don't know if you're aware of that in the city or not, because they're pretty well hidden on a flat roof. But that is something that we did as a local church, is trying to go more green.
That's great.
So a couple of questions and just a statement. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head with the trickiness of this, and that if we ask people to do this piece by piece, switch out a boiler and go electric, switch out a water heater and go electric, without pairing it with that efficiency at the moment, or without pairing it with solar production, the delta is higher, right? Because you're paying more for electric. Part of that's we can unpack that all we want to as to why, right? We pay the highest rates in the Great Lakes region for our utility. We just have the highest rates. That's a problem. Right, so we're going to keep intervening as a municipality and say that's not acceptable. So we're going to keep fighting for lower rates, one, but that doesn't help you. So what we're working on right now is a home decarbonization strategy, and this was on one of the slides that I didn't talk about it, where we picked the Bryant neighborhood, and there what we're trying to do is design with the residents what would it actually look like if we came in and at one time did all of it. We did the energy efficiency work, so we lowered demand. We electrified, which is going to increase demand, and you put on renewables, so you lower it again. And we've modeled for various types of Ann Arbor homes that we can actually get you cost parity with what you pay today, and in some cases we can save you money. But it doesn't work if you do it one by one, right? Like, it works as a package. That gets tricky, and then that's more money, right? So we're also thinking about, can we maybe create like a sustainable utility that is supportive, like it's in the middle of DTE. We're not going to take DTE out. All we focus on is doing what I just said. We're going to go household by household and serve this market. And if we do that, we can actually get you lower rates because renewables are far cheaper per unit of energy production than what we've got in our centralized system. Plus, you're not paying for transmission and distribution because you don't need the wires, the poles and the wires anymore, or you need them minimally, especially if I put a battery on your system too. So now the power goes out, but you're okay. So we're working on all of this. We have an energy analyst in our office who's an economist, and she's running all of the models. And then again, we won a grant from the McKnight Foundation to test this in the in the Bryant neighborhood. And we applied, it's a very long shot, but we did apply for $1 million Bloomberg grant to get the money, the seed capital, to start revolving those funds in the community. You're right. I'll also share, that's the cost to us, but for what it's worth, very personally, my water heater blew in our home in 2019, and we had to, it was in winter, we had a very fun conversation as a family about, I think this is time to go electric. My partner was like, I think it's time to have a water heater. I was like, I think it's time for electric. And so he's like, that's on you. And it took 5 installers. The 5th one finally gave me a quote for electric. The other 4 refused to. They just refused to. They're like, it's going to cost you too much money. And I was like, I know what I want. I want this system, and I know what to ask for, right? I was like, this is what I want. That can't happen, right? That can't happen. It was 6 days without water in our house. That's unacceptable. So part of what we're also doing is we have partnerships with manufacturers, the people who are producing these various products, and we're working with the contractors so that when they come into your home, we're getting discounts passed through, because this is volume, right? If I can tell someone if you work with us, I'll get 100 water heaters installed for your company this year. Will you give a 20% off price sale, right, to folk? And they're like, yes, if you move that much volume of an electric water heater, absolutely, because we sell like 4 a year. I'll stock them. So we're trying to work not just certainly at the consumer side, but honestly, you probably couldn't even get one right now. I mean, you'd have to be so persistent. So we're trying to even go further upstream to solve the problems and then work across the entire spectrum. Sorry, that was probably way more than you wanted, but thanks.
But I did also want to know about the installation of solar on a house.
Oh yeah.
As a homeowner, what your first step should be if you wanted to consider something like that.
Yeah, so if you want to go in with the Solarize program, which I would highly recommend, I dropped a link in the chat. We have, let me see. I know Julie is our Solarize contractor. We had one yesterday, group 5. It looks like
April 25th.
Thank you. The next one's April 25th. All right. You can sign up and come and learn more about that program. And then we help, like the actual installer will come out, will give you a quote, you'll negotiate with them. Julie will be there to make sure you're getting responses in a timely way. If things get stuck in the building department, which they tend not to, they tend to be like filed wrong by the solar contractor, but like Julie is there to help you navigate that whole process because it's not intuitive, right? Doing this. So that's the benefit of the Solarize program, is that you have someone there to help when you need it.
So, and that's for anybody that wants to know a little bit more about solar, and it's not threatening at all. You can just go to a Zoom meeting like this, and then somebody will be going through, this is what it typically costs, this is what the impact is, and those are Solarize meetings are like that. And then you can, and you don't have to, you're not committing to it, and you may go to another one, and then there might be one in your neighborhood, and then at some point you might sign up and contract with to get installation.
Yeah, no requirement at all. It is informational, and you don't have to be in Ann Arbor. The way that we justify this is one person from Ann Arbor has to be on the line in order for me to pay jewelry salary, right? Because it's taxpayer dollars. But if 5 people from Ann Arbor and 44 people from Saline were on the line, I don't care. I want everyone to have solar. That's great. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, this is fascinating. Thank you. One thing that I'm concerned about is that obviously there's so much that has to do with, long-term thinking. And I'm wondering how you're thinking of dealing with the changing, what seems to feel like a constantly changing political climate. And even if we have a huge investment in infrastructure right now, you know, what that's going to mean, it seems a little baffling to me.
My job is a mixture of pure excitement, pure tears, a little bit of frustration. Like it's all of the emotional spectrum. The way that we approach that it's very direct. It's sort of one, I think I said this before, stop emissions wherever we can. So for example, with the infrastructure bill, we worked with Dingell's office to propose some ideas that would be smart infrastructure. Well, we have to replace a fire station in town. And I worked with the fire chief and we're designing a net zero energy fire station, right? So like that's one example where we just say, we have to do this piece of infrastructure. Let's do it the right way. I work with the Housing Commission. Jen Hall is the head of the Ann Arbor Housing Commission, and we propose net zero energy housing sites, every housing site, right? Getting it to net zero energy emissions. What that does is obviously help us advance our climate goals, but the comfort in those homes will improve. And that's more money because they don't have to pay for utilities that go into services or more for affordable housing. So I really try to focus on the things that are about doing it right now. You know, like what are the things that are short-term, long-term? Like if I help Jen do that, she long-term has more money to invest in the kinds of things we know we need. If I work with the transit authority to help them expand transit to underserved areas, I know that's going to serve us well. And it also means we can have more transit-oriented development throughout the whole county, right? So it's kind of immediate wins that have long-term ramifications is what I spend a lot of time on.
That makes sense.
Is policy. I am, I don't know if any of you have ever heard me say this before, but I am not a fan of blaming the individual in the climate crisis. Gail, you could do everything you wanted to stop climate change, and by yourself, not going to work. And that is a strategy, it's a tactic that has been used a lot in lots of different movements, from nicotine and cigarette issues, recycling. I mean, if you go back to the 60s when we talked about recycling, like it was all on you, like you were the problem. Yeah. You know what's the problem? Perhaps the manufacturers that are creating things with products that are meant to constantly be disposed. So a not insignificant part of what I do is work on changing the system. Okay. So I want you to have solar on your roof. Wow, I think that's great. I also want to make sure that our utilities are producing renewable energy because everyone should have it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You see, there was a question in the chat about recycling and that thing we've heard over the last couple of years that, recycling doesn't really get recycled now. It gets sent to landfills. And I know that Brian Weinert has explained to me and other people that, no, it really is going to King Cincinnati now. And in our case, they do have a market for it, but sometimes the city ends up in a net payment situation that they have to pay to have some things recycled. So it's our social responsibility that drives us to do things that in a better market, if China hadn't stopped accepting recycles and plastic, we might be getting some more income, but for the time being. But it's back to what you just said. Manufacturers are cranking out more packaging that uses plastic than ever before.
Yeah, I will let cheeky statement and then I'll get to the actual answer. Last night we have family movie night at my house, like once a week, and I had my 6-year-old watch Hello, Dolly. She's very into musicals and she likes kissing movies, as she calls them. And I was amazed at the introduction to Hello, Dolly. Everyone carried canvas bags or some form of reusable, like as they were walking down the streets in New York, right? Like it was just a totally different culture. And fast forward to the disposableness of our time. It was just like, it caught me in that moment as like, oh wow, like this was premeditated, right? You don't have those kinds of shifts in culture without that. So to the comment about recycling, one is actually most of our stuff is recycled. We do have markets for them, and we also are reopening our MRF, our materials recovery facility locally. So things will be processed here. We have more work to do for sure about things like electronics or bulky items. You know, like a couch that may no longer be relevant for you still has use, likely for someone else. So how are we keeping those things in circulation? And when that couch doesn't, how are we breaking it apart to take out the materials that do have use and can kind of go back into functioning. The other thing about waste, and I'll say, or materials management more broadly, is it's a gateway. It's so personal, right, about what we do that it really matters. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions, upstream emissions are really significant for what we produce. Downstream emissions tend to be fairly marginal because we burn a lot of coal in our electric utility. Like, it's just really, really dirty. But it doesn't matter because that brings people in. It's a part of the movement, right? Like, if I start caring about what happens to this, I start caring about a lot of other things. So it's kind of a gateway into the broader movement as well. Rachel, I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Jane's. I was going to ask Jane's questions that were in the chat. There was also a question about what happened to the A2 Blue Planet event that used to be held at Pioneer High.
Electronics recycling, like electronics recycling. There used to be a collection at Pioneer High. The county has stuff like that at EMU, but not during the pandemic. I don't.
Yeah, I'm guessing pandemic.
Summer.
I'm looking to see if I can find it.
Jane asked that.
Hey, this is Jane. My sister-in-law lives in Livingston County, and they have partnered with somebody recently, I think a company, I don't know what the company does, and they're offering completely free electronics recycling for their residents.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And like TVs, computers, and everything. There's not, but you can only recycle your keyboard or something,
And that's really cool. If you have anything about that, I'll Google it. But if you know,
sure,
that would be
I'll send it to you.
I would like to pour that. Yeah.
Great.
That would be fabulous.
Washtenaw County has had collection events across from the Convocation Center, a huge parking lot. I know because we went there for Common Cycle and we were able to siphon off some of the bikes, but I don't think there was any restriction on what you could bring. So they had toxics and electronics and big appliances, small appliances, and trashy like stuff.
Trashy stuff.
Yeah. I mean, couches that weren't going to be reused by somebody.
Yeah.
But I mean, in my opinion, I'm big on solid waste, and I think there's a huge, huge opportunity, like you mentioned, to make sure that a lot of those things don't go to dumpsters and get thrown away.
We've been taught to be consumers. I mean, our system is a consumer-based system, right? Like, I want the trendiest clothes. I want this. Yeah.
Right.
Think about iPhones. My husband the other day was like, your iPhone's 5 years old. You need a new one. I was like, why? Like, I literally could, he was like, because there's newer ones. I was like, no, like, it functions perfectly. But that, right, like, that is inherent, like, that message is constant around us. He's also in IT for what it's. He's super.
Well, there's been a big change in the lifetime of a lot of people on the line now, from when we were young and plastic was used mainly in structural things to now it's very much used in plastic. And according to the movie, The Story of Plastic, half of the plastic produced in the world was produced in the last 15 years.
And most of it's not recyclable.
Right.
It's like
very small. A little teeny part gets recycled, like whatever, some number, 14%, and much of that goes down cycle. It's not reused at the same level. Anyway, a whole nother topic, but.
Traverse City has a pretty good recycling system too. And when we got rid of a mattress and box spring that were decades old at our cottage, they actually dismantled it and took the wood out and took the stuffing out and recycled the whole thing. And it was funny because my husband and I went there to drop it off, and we asked if we could see how the system works and get a tour, because we'd love to do that stuff. And the guy was so excited because nobody had ever asked to see what happens behind the scenes. But it was gratifying to see it all broken up and recycled, with the coils recycled with metal and all of that.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Well, I told and I promised that I would let you all go by noon unless anyone has any pressing questions. Clark made me promise.
Yeah. We need to let you go too. We know that you're working so many hours. We really appreciate being here. And if people have more questions, then we can get them to you. Let me know.
Thank you so much.
With that, yeah,
My
thank you very much.
pleasure, my pleasure.
Thank you, Missy.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All right.
That was
Missy.
very helpful.